Save Local Journalism, episode number 16. This is Black Press Live, and today we have 4 of our younger generation joining us, which is always a treat. Today we have Lindy Villakazi from the Washington Informer, Ashley Mahoney from the Charlotte Post, John Thomas III from the Christian Recorder, and we hope to be joined by Misha Green of the Afro. But we're also joined by Deanna Tisdale Johnson of the Jackson Advocate, and Deanna actually is going to be co-hosting this special edition. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Great to be here.
Absolutely. So listen. So I want to start with Lindy. Lindy with the Washington Informer. First of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do for the Washington Informer?
So I've actually been with the Washington Informer for a brief time so far. It hasn't been just a year yet, but I've had such a great experience with the people that I've been able to meet and interview and the staff that I'm working with. I cover local beats, mostly pertaining to the arts and lifestyle beat, a few business beats as well. And so I've been focusing more on just trying to expand coverage, especially as certain topics are changing and relating to COVID-19. So just writing and reporting it right now at the moment.
Great. And down south, Ashley Mahoney, the Charlotte Post. Why don't you fill us in a little bit of what you do down there for the Charlotte Post?
Oh, goodness, a little bit of everything. I feel like that's the nature of any reporter in 2020. You have to do a little bit of everything. And my journey with the paper began in 2014. And it's been a wonderful love story ever since. And I can't imagine doing anything else. It's a family, that's for sure. It is a family owned and operated publication under the Johnsons. So it's a little bit of COVID-19 coverage, a little bit of sports, whatever sports look like right now. 2020, you have to do a little bit it's absolutely amazing to be part of this family. We are actually having the foundation component of our paper, the Charlotte Post Foundation, highlight African-American seniors throughout Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. And since we usually have a huge banquet for them, and of course, there's a pandemic, you can't do that right now. So we're having a small drive-through recognition ceremony for them on Wednesday. So it'll be heartwarming. There's a lot about this industry that's heartbreaking. So whenever you're able to find a little bit of heartwarming, it's always good.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also have John Thomas III, not the second, not the first, but the third. John Thomas, Christian Recorder, welcome, and tell us a little bit about what you do for the Christian Recorder.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. The Christian Recorder is the official newspaper of the AME Church. So my job primarily is working for the church to help source news as well as create and share our own views. So it's a little bit of everything. We have a staff that we share a co-op with the publishing department. I help assist with everything from the layout, getting into articles. We have a couple of stringers who work with us as well as people who come in from time to time. This summer, of course, COVID has hit. And so being a church publication dealing with COVID, we have had to we've done a lot of things trying to help our congregations, help to navigate in COVID. And also, June is a very special time of month for the AME Church because we all know that's when the Emmanuel 9 tragedy happened 5 years ago, and this was the 50th anniversary. So we had a couple of media events to deal with that. And also, we tried to make sure that our persons knew about how we responded to the situation regarding George Floyd. So we launched a series called TCR Dialogues, where we tried to interview our clergy who are on the ground making news. And so our first interview was with our lead pastor in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area who actually led a silent clergy march. So my operational responsibilities are everything from checking Facebook posts with our social media manager to helping our assistant editor lay out stuff. But also I have denominational responsibilities aside from that. So it's an interesting job, but it's a great one. I've had it since 2016.
Well, it sounds interesting, John. Sounds like all of you have a lot to do. I want to turn it over a bit to Deanna Tisdale Johnson. When we had Deanna on earlier in the month, we had a lot of comments, and we really had to get Deanna back. She proved to be very popular with with our viewers. And we have a lot of loyal viewers too. So we're appreciative that Deanna could take the time out from the Jackson Advocate. Deanna, I'm sure there's a boatload of questions you have for your younger peers here.
Oh, definitely. It's great to be here to talk with you guys, because you're important. We're important as the younger generation, as millennials. The way that we see the world, we're writing about that. We're informing people about that. And I think that's very important because millennials and Generation Z are a big part of getting the news out and changing the landscape of our country at this time, especially with Black Lives Matter and the social unrest that we've been having over the past couple of months. We've kind of been leading the charge, and I'm very excited to see that. And the way that we tell our stories is important as well. So I'm very excited to hear more from you and talk more with you guys. I would first like to ask, just how is everything? Where were you when COVID-19 hit your area, and what was your first response to that? Lindy, we'll start with you.
So I was here in the working mostly in the district, living in Maryland. And honestly, when the outbreak initially happened, I knew that it was serious, but I think I was more hopeful that it was going to be a kind of a temporary season. I kind of was more hopeful that, okay, well, right now we may have to stay home and take these precautions, but in about a month, 6 weeks, this will probably die down. We'll be able to resume back to regular life and business. And, I learned very quickly that it was a lot more serious than I had thought that it was. And it's just transitioned me and everyone else into a new normal. I think that although we've seen a lot of destructive things happen because of COVID, and it was very difficult to adjust to those stay-home orders initially, it's done a lot of good as well, depending on how people have utilized this period. Being able to just put more work into your personal craft. I know I've taken advantage of that as well, and being more connected with myself and what I'm paying attention to. That, when you're just so on the go, you may not have that time to kind of stop and be in your own bubble. So yeah, but I've been here watching the whole thing from indoors as much as possible.
I know that's right. Ashley, what about you? How was it when it first hit your area? What was the general response at first? And also, how has it been kind of the timeline? How has that been since it first hit for you?
I remember at first, there was a press release that came from Novant Health, which is one of the major medical players here in Charlotte. And I remember just working with them, working with their doctors, and writing a story about this coronavirus and COVID-19. And I remember asking our editor-in-chief, Herb White, what do you think is going to happen? And this was far before any stay-at-home orders came into play. He said, we'll see. And then lo and behold, about a month and a half after that story, suddenly Mecklenburg County, which is where we're based, said, all right, stay-at-home order for the next 30 days. And this was in March, the end of March. I remember just driving home from the office that day and just sitting at a stoplight and getting a notification about Mecklenburg County enacting that stay-at-home order for 5 o'clock that Friday, and thinking, what's going on? What kind of universe are we living in? And just seeing how all of that is developed. Of course, it was a lot of, all right, if you're a multimedia journalist, how do you generate content when a lot of your content is predicated on video and face-to-face interviews? Zoom has become everyone's best friend. We've transitioned toward a lot of IGTV series, for just a number of things, from arts and culture to just so many different things. Johnson C. Smith had a drive-through ceremony graduation that we covered, and that was my first assignment back out in the normal, if you will. And I remember forgetting my mask and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm that person here without a mask. Thankfully, our photographer is like, I've got you. I've got several. What type do you need? What's going to fit you? And just thinking about that now, I've got a mask with me everywhere. It's like you leave your house with your phone, your car keys, and your mask. You don't do anything else. But there have been more and more assignments in recent weeks that have taken me outside of the phone interview or the Zoom call, things that demand, that physical presence, whether it was the Charlotte Black Lives Matter mural on South Tryon Street. And that's something that you could cover from afar, but it's not going to have the same impact as being there and speaking with the artists and seeing their work and hearing them say, this is great from the city, but policy change needs to follow them saying, here, paint the street. So things like that. But it's an interesting time to be a journalist for sure.
Definitely. So I remember where I was, because it wasn't really on our radar that much. We saw that it was happening, but for some reason it just never seemed like it would reach us, you know. But when we got the first case in Mississippi, I was like, wait, this is actually serious. And prepping and preparing our constituents, our readers for what was happening, I think that was the first thing that was on my mind. John, how was that for you guys, especially being a part of the religious aspect of things, where in the South and across the nation, a lot of people were like, wait, I can't go to church? What's up with that? How was that for you guys when you first heard the news and transitioning to where you are now?
Well, first of all, for me personally, I was on my way to a conference that week, the National Political Science Association Conference, National Conference of Black Political Sciences in Atlanta. And literally, I was leaving, and I'm also at the University of Chicago, and they were like, you can't go anywhere. And I was like, what do you mean we can't go anywhere? And literally, as I was about to get on the plane, and then I started getting these emails from other people saying, our university said we can't travel. Our university said we can't travel. And then to see in Chicago, where I am right now, that, within a week, it goes from you need to socially distance to we're implementing basically a quarantine for the next 3 to 4 weeks. It was it was rapid. It was like in a week. And for our churches, I remember our pastors really had a tough time in some instances. I have a good friend here in Chicago whose wife is a doctor. And the minute she heard about COVID, she told him, you need to shut your church down. Where there was a resistance from our ministers that one pastor actually adamantly argued with me up and down about how he was not going to shut his church down until his bishop told him to. Well, the next day his bishop told him, you need to shut your church down. And just seeing, people holding out for, well, maybe the government said we could do 50 people and then 10, and then now en masse saying we have to socially distance because our members are at risk group. I mean, it's no secret that many people who go to the Black church faithfully on Sundays are in that certain category and those other complications. And one of the things that we also know, like for instance, in our New York region, our first Episcopal district, they've kept a tally of persons in COVID on the bishop gave a report. It's just staggering to see, you hear we've lost pastors, members, and then people who've just gotten sick because of this. I mean, me personally, my family, my uncle died of COVID in New York. He was in New York within the first 2 weeks. He was fine one day playing dominoes. Then 2 days later, he was in the hospital. And then the next day he was gone. So, it was a struggle for us to adapt to this. And we are still adapting. I mean, we can't have funerals. You can't go to church in person. And then we just released our health guide from our health department from AME Church about what to do when you go back into the church. And it's 25 pages of everything from sanitizing microphone stands to not having congregational singing. And one of my friends candidly said, if we have to do all this to get back into the church, we need to stay socially distancing and we need to stay on virtual service. So that's been the other thing that's happened. I've seen a lot of creativity across the AME Church. That has been very helpful and encouraging to see people doing things virtually. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, John. I just wanted to let our viewers know we are joined by Misha Green of the Afro in Baltimore and Washington. Welcome, Misha.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. And I am so sorry for my tardiness, but as you know, as reporters, we're always working. And I was actually interviewing Clark Peters, who plays Otis in Spike Lee's new film, The Five Bloods. So I got the go ahead from my superiors to keep going just for a little while longer in that interview. But I'm so happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
We are certainly happy to have you. We have Deanna Tisdale Johnson of the Jackson Advocate. And Misha, Deanna was just asking our other fantastic young members of the Black press here on this panel about where they were when they first heard about COVID and what were you doing. I'll let you answer that as well. And I'm sure Deanna has some follow-ups to that.
Definitely. So where was I initially for COVID? I guess I had been traveling the weekend before it hit DC proper. So obviously I'd been keeping up to date with all things COVID in the United States and, in Wuhan, et cetera. And so I'd been in Western Massachusetts the weekend it hit DC proper. So I came Sunday night, early Monday morning, I was back and I turn on the news and find out that it started at an Episcopal church. My mom is canon to the ordinary for the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. So it was a weird place to be in because, of course, I had all the sources. I was really I knew exactly the name of the rector who was originally diagnosed and how many members it affected pretty immediately. Only because of the fact, not because even my mom was really giving up too much, but because I'm so familiar with it because of her work. And so immediately I put on my journalism hat. Covered Mayor Bowser's, who's the mayor of Washington, D.C.'s press conference on the state of COVID. And that week just got really weird. I'm sure that's what many of you all shared as well. But that week just got, really, really weird. Monday, I was still going in office and reporting at events. Wednesday is our publishing day, and I had to cover a play later that night. And so, I did publishing, I filmed everything I normally film, and I go to cover the play and I get an email from every other theater in DC that they were closing except the theater that I was covering this play for. My boss says, if you feel comfortable, you know how we are, we're gonna go get this story. If you feel comfortable, go out there. So I go cover it, and the next morning I wake up and find out that the theater had been closed. So, no point of reviewing the show. And I went to go do a podcast that I do. And I found out I was the only podcaster that had showed up that day.
Wow.
So, things just escalated very quickly. I really love how the Afro kicked into high gear. Immediately, they told us that we could switch to working digitally and virtually. So many of us did so. Then it became a requirement for safety reasons. And so we did that. And the Afro has been wonderful. We have a daily check-in, except on publishing day, because they know how crazy we would be if that were the case. But we have a daily check-in. We know everything that's happening with each department. And what's been really great is that they are really sort of other departments who have never been so involved in the editorial process are super involved now. And it's great because one, we know what they're interested in and what they're not finding in our coverage as well as in other places and what we need to bring to the table. But it's also just been great to see how an entire operation works. And so it's been really rewarding. And I really commend the Afro for allowing all of us to have a seamless transition into this journey.
That's amazing. And I know that it's been, a transition for everybody, but just like me, you have said, that we have been learning new things and being able to be creative in other ways, which I think is a launch pad for us really taking advantage of the situation that we're in. What would you say is the most creative thing or the most creative way you've been able to tell our stories and our news since COVID-19 has hit? And I'll go to John with this.
Oh, well, I guess going back to what I said initially, like using video and using like first a StreamYard. I work with the columnist who's actually based out of Brazil. She's actually in Chicago because she said, I'm not living out the pandemic in Brazil. So she came back to be with her mom in Chicago. She's going back to Brazil. And so we contemplated doing interviews, and she's done several things using StreamYard. And I said, well, why don't you try it with us? So that's when we decided to do our first interview via StreamYard with the pastor in Minneapolis, who talked about the march with the pastor supporting those who sought justice for George Floyd, and just realizing what we could do. So I think definitely beginning to use more video, beginning to realize we don't have to. I don't have to be there if I can find someone who can tell the story, who wants to talk, and realizing people really want to hear voices. People really want content. People really want to see things. So that's basically the most innovative thing we've done, which is start launching a video series, trying to go behind the scenes to highlight AMEs that people normally wouldn't hear from but should. So that's the creative thing we've done right now.
That's wonderful. What about going back to COVID-19 and just the news that we've been talking about? What have been some of the downside of this, like the racial disparities that we've seen that have been wreaking havoc on the African American community, and how it seems like as soon as people started focusing and saying, oh, or seeing that African Americans were disproportionately affected by COVID-19, a lot of some of the support that we have been getting on some testing, on news, it just stopped being reported. So what do you say about that? And we'll go to Misha.
So let me just make sure I got the question correct. Sort of the negative sides of certain outlets not necessarily reporting all of the negative impacts of COVID-19 in the African American community.
Right.
So yeah, that was something for me that, and the Afro as a whole, that we made sure we pushed and have continued to push. In my weekly COVID updates, I give the amount of African Americans who have died from COVID-19 in Washington, D.C. I've written several stories, not only talking about how African Americans have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19, but the environmental racism that plays a role in it. Obviously, the systemic racism that we've had an unfortunate opportunity to talk quite a lot about, given all of the issues happening in the country and world in regards to racism. But anyway, the Afro has been adamant about not being that news source that forgets about the major impact COVID-19 is having on the African American community. I won't call out other sources, but some of those big cable television networks that I do tune into for news at times have had these specials on how on COVID in the African American community, and they've talked a lot about the fact that the African American community has been decimated by it, that we don't have the right foods, but they're not and that we already have these pre-existing disorders. Those are all facts, and we know those are facts. But one thing that I am happy that we've been able to do in our coverage is talk about sort of the root of those issues. Impacted by a great deal of things disproportionately here in the United States. So, while COVID-19 is more, we're talking about the fact that, yes, this is an unfortunate pandemic affecting African Americans, but the root of it goes way before 2020.
So
Yes.
I'm sorry, Deanna. So I would like to, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of happenings surrounding the aftermath of the George Floyd murder, and we'd like to get you guys' take, and we can start with Lindy and get some thoughts from each of you, Ashley, on how has that affected your coverage? How difficult has it been to cover things related to the George Floyd protests?
It is difficult just in the way that it's so disheartening, what we're witnessing and just the era that we're living in, especially with the Black community, while we're already suffering so much from COVID and the current crisis that are happening within our homes, within our family, within our area. It's just been a lot of tension that we're witnessing from different, communities and just from us as a whole. It's difficult to get out there at times to be able to cover those protests because there's so much danger involved as well. But I do find it important because, there's a narrative that needs to be spoken that is not necessarily communicated on our mainstream platforms. And I think that it's important that we are pushing that narrative as accurately as possible because it comes best coming from us. It's told best and so most accurately coming from us. So while it's difficult, I do find it important to make sure that we're on the ground, really getting the story and being able to communicate the backstory as to why there's so much anger, why we are erupting in protests, as opposed to just the typical coverage of, communicating what has been ruined or, the social unrest that we already are aware is happening. There's just many nuances behind why these things are happening. So I think that's an important narrative to have.
Yeah, and Ashley, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I also would like for you guys to perhaps just discuss here out in the open tips that you might be able to give each other while covering this. Go ahead, Ashley.
Exactly, like you said, it's easy for mainstream media to say, "Oh, look at this demolished building." Like, there's so much more happening, and there's so much more behind all of this. And something that we began exploring was the response of the community. Like, okay, you're talking about one aspect, but you have to look at the big picture. You can't just say that you're going to pinpoint this one thing. Oh, we covered it. No, that's not coverage. That's just a 2-second blurb on a local news station, and that's not coverage. But when you look at something that hit home for me, I cover a lot of sports for the Post, and there is an athlete here, Hugh Roberts, who is a cousin, I believe he said they're second cousins of George Floyd. And before George Floyd's death, he put together a video about Ahmaud Arbery and how, as a Black man, he's like, I'm just out running as a professional athlete, doing my job, making sure that I'm fit for my job. And just as easily, it could have been me. And he went on to explain playing for a team here in Charlotte, a USL Championship soccer team that was very slow to react, was very hesitant to say anything. And when I reached out to them on June 1st, they said, we don't want to check a PR box. This isn't about checking a PR box. It's about standing with your players when over half of your starting lineup is composed of Black players. You can't stand with them. You can't tell them that you support them publicly, not just this is behind closed doors conversation, but publicly you can't stand with them. And within an hour after that interview, they had posted statements, and still it was very tone deaf. We want to look like we're doing the right thing, but we have no plans to actually go ahead and do the right thing. And there was before one of their games a few years ago, he was actually a student at Shaw University at the time, took a knee while he was singing the anthem. And I can't seem to forget this, but speaking with them and hearing everyone here is welcome, but there was a distinct but. Everyone here is welcome, but everyone here is welcome until. And like you said, Lindy, it's oftentimes people saying what they think people want to hear, what they know will appear to that quote unquote mainstream audience, but it's often just a microcosm of larger disparities that really need to be addressed.
Yeah, and to that point, Ashley, again, John and Misha, I'd like, and Lindy and Ashley, just jump in if you can share or discuss, rather, tips that you could give to each other. What have you guys found to be effective while you've been covering this situation? And any tips you can offer each other?
Go ahead, John.
Well, I mean, first thing I was going to say is that I think, but I was going to go off on the point that you made. You know, anyone who tries to cover these events in a vacuum, you know, if it's one thing the Black press can remind the mainstream press is that, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic, and as some of my friends have started calling this, the 1619 pandemic, are both linked to each other. So you can't talk about COVID-19 without 1619 as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when we try to divorce these narratives saying, well, the Black people are dying because they have hypertension, and well, George Floyd, no, these are all linked one of the same. And I think what we've tried to do with the Christian Recorder is also uplift the fact, because people are saying, where's the Black church? Where are these people? What are they doing? I can't speak for other denominations, but what we've tried to do with AMEs is we've tried to make sure that people know that our clergy are out in protest, that our members are out in protest, that our churches are COVID response centers and sponsoring testing. I want people to see that, you know, we just aren't sitting at home behind our computers watching our service and paying our tithes on Givelify. We're actually trying to do our best to be responsive and be a place and be a church. Like, for instance, we had a march up here in Chicago. I went out and marched. I went out, put on a face mask, and I marched 2 miles up in a predominantly white neighborhood. And it was interesting because that march was organized by Black people who lived in this neighborhood. If you know anything about Chicago, you know Chicago is uber segregated. And the Black people said, we're glad you all are here, but we want the Black people to come up to the front and speak. And so this about 10,000 white people, just for a mixed crowd, made way for these dozens of Black folks to come out and talk. And they applauded and they listened. Now, unfortunately, later that evening, there was a rash of violence in the urban area by the police against some persons protesting after curfew, which that's a lot of the discussion. But I think the best thing we can do is make sure that people, as Black press, we understand that our people need to understand these narratives are linked. And so our coverage should try to get people to see why these links exist, and that, you know, we are doing what we've always done, which is highlight perspectives that the mainstream media tries to miss or simplify.
Sure.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. Have you had any help, or have any of your white cohorts reached out to help and spread the word of love and unity between the Black church? And really, still, it is the white church, because, as we say, the most segregated day of the week is Sunday. Has anybody reached out to you to show unity?
You know, that's a funny question. I'll put on my other hat. I've also served on the Associated Church Press Board. So we have our monthly meetings, and we had our board meeting, and I apologized after I made my comment, but the board member said I was right to say it. We were having a discussion about Black Lives Matter, and someone said, well, we need to talk about this and that. I said, no, this is a Black Lives Matter discussion. We are not going to, you know, pull this down by talking about X, Y, Z. We can talk about those other issues, but let's not, you know, try to dilute the issue. But at least, you know, we've had, you know, the several mainstream Christian publications like the Christian Century have reached out to us to help do coverage. And I was on a panel. People asked, what can we do? I said, call the Black press. Don't write a story about Black people unless you call Black people first. Is that something as easy as that? And when you call us, don't let us talk. Don't just tell me what I'm going to tell you. You know, it's okay to ask questions, engage the dialogue. So I appreciated the willingness of the Associated Church Press to do a webinar with myself and another person about covering race and religion, and also my peers to actually beginning to ask questions. So at least on that end, I saw collaboration.
Yes, I agree with that. And even to you, Lindy, I know as reporters, as, you know, we go out and we still have to network. We network with people from news stations, TV stations, other newspapers that are mainstream media. Have any of your networking, cohorts called or text you to talk about or lend support in this?
My colleagues and I have definitely just discussed the nature and the status of what is happening around us, how it has affected just our craft and what we're doing and how we're getting out there and getting these stories told. But I have had support from just certain people that I've interviewed, actually. A certain aspect for the LGBT council for the elderly. One of the representatives is just very empathetic to understanding and supporting, what is happening right now, and understanding that although we still have a job to do, we're not exactly in the highest of spirits, because even if it's not happening to us personally, it is happening to us personally because it is our community. The issues that are happening to us due to COVID-19, due to the police killings, just having that understanding and that emotional support and respect to the times right now, I think has been very helpful. So I've gotten support in that sense.
Yeah, again, we are with 4 of the younger generation of the Black press. We are glad to have them with us. We also always want to acknowledge those who have been watching: Annette Johnson, Demfo Gay Opepi. I can't pronounce your last name. I apologize. I don't know if I pronounced the first name right. Cuetta Campbell is watching as well. Again, this is Black Press Live. We are with 4 of our younger generation, actually 5, because we certainly don't want to leave out Deanna Tisdale Johnson, who is co-hosting this afternoon, and we really appreciate that. Ashley, and the rest of you, what would you ask each other? What questions you might have for each other as journalists? We'd like to just open it up to you guys and see what questions you would ask each other, not just in covering the aftermath of George Floyd and not just in covering the COVID-19, but anything that you might have in mind.
Oh goodness, maybe it's just me, but I feel like I work more now that I'm working from home rather than the office, because there would on occasion be that point of still pulling out your tools and working once you got home. But now I swear it's like I just get up and it keeps going, and I have to physically tell myself, stop working. It will be fine if you just leave it alone for a couple of hours. It will be fine.
That's
definitely
my experience. I know that I have been joking, like, the work day is as soon as I wake up until I close my eyes, because I'm working from home. And I felt like so much of the work I did prior was covering events, going out on interviews, going to this press conference. And so to not have that, you'd think that you're not working all day, and yet it's been so much more. But I also feel like this has been a really good time and a rewarding time to see how your colleagues are continuing to work hard through this. And, the first time since COVID that I've been seeing my peers out on the field has been covering these protests. And, all of our styles are so incredibly different, and we're, all out there trying to tell the same story, if you will. But it's been very interesting to see how the shift has been made in journalism. And just to sort of go back to the last question about, any advice and tips for digital coverage. My role at the Afro is DC editor and digital content editor. My background is in broadcast. And so when I initially came to the Afro, I was so excited about bringing broadcast to the Black press. And I've learned in the 2 years since I've served in this capacity, that's not what this is about. It's bringing this digital coverage to the audience and how they want it and how they receive it. And so this time has been really wonderful and rewarding and challenging, because I've now had to completely shift to just pretty much virtual journalism and doing these Zoom interviews where, first, you know, when I do in-person interviews, I would like loosen up my guests and play icebreakers and things that we just don't have time for on StreamYard and Zoom. But the other thing that I've been getting back from my colleagues, and kudos, and the Afro is in a Facebook journalism project right now. And so we actually have mentors who are looking at us from everywhere. And our mentor is in Scotland looking at our coverage, but he's American. So he's totally, you know, into all the coverage, but because he's not here, obviously. But one thing he said, and from a lot of our colleagues that I've been getting back, and particularly white colleagues, is like, oh my gosh, like it feels like I'm there. You're bringing us into the protests with you. And that's a luxury that I have working for the Afro, because I'm protesting too. Like I'm there, but I'm protesting too. You know what I mean? And I understand the rage. And when I'm doing a live and some guy comes and yells because that he thinks that politician is who we shouldn't be focused on, I understand and I give him that moment. But it's a very different experience in terms of what they're able to do, many in mainstream media, and definitely not in the Black press. So, you know, they're like, yes, we need more of that kind of coverage. And so that's been my approach, is like frontline coverage and making our audience feel like they're on the front line with you.
And that's very important during this time. And I think that we've really been able to accomplish that with all of the new virtual digital platforms that we have, just like you said. What have been some of the wins that you've been happy to report on? Like this past weekend was historic for Mississippi, that our flag is now being taken down. It's not our flag anymore, but it is being taken down. You know, our Mississippi Department of Archives and History has 15 days to take it down as soon as the governor signs. And we are excited to see a new day. And I'm excited to report on that. Lindy, what is a win that we've had that you've been excited to report on?
Definitely. I feel also some of the wins have been finding local organizations that are really active in helping our community with issues that go beyond COVID-19. Because just to kind of piggyback on Misha and Ashley's sentiments, you know, we have been in a crisis, and a lot of us have been in a crisis prior to COVID-19 that kind of caused COVID to be on the back burner for certain people and certain families. And I love to find organizations and people that are helping to work with these families and individuals that are not getting that exposure in mainstream media or that attention because COVID has kind of exacerbated their home life. You know, it's a huge shift for everyone. Everyone is at home with their kids more often now. If you already were in a lower income position, you know, people may have lost jobs, which just, it makes for a total thunderstorm of issues that are just beyond what's happening right now. So I love being able to find people and organizations that really speak to that. And, you know, I think it pushes more hope for us as well, that we can kind of group together and come out of this in a more productive way.
I agree with that. Ashley, what about you? What has been a win that you have been excited to report on during all of this?
It was right before Father's Day, and it was a spontaneous and unexpected assignment, but it was a fully masked up assignment at the Harvey B. Gantt Center here in Charlotte. But it was a panel put together by DeBaby. He's a Vance High School alumnus and now Grammy nominated, known quite well, but he came back to his hometown and said, look, there are problems here, and I've got the platform to bring a lot of people together and address it. So they met at the Gantt Center, and it was the mayor, it was a member of the council, local judges, Sheriff McFadden, and so forth. And also among that panel was former Panther linebacker Thomas Davis. Thomas Davis's activism in the community is no secret, no surprise. But everyone goes through and they're talking for what was supposed to be about an hour and a half goes by, and he hasn't said anything, but you can just see he's there with this deep, pensive look on his face. And one of the members of the panel, Christy Puckett-Williams, she is a local activist, and she was sharing how they wanted to get fathers bailed out in time for Father's Day, noon the Saturday before Father's Day, and sharing how, they didn't have enough money for everyone. And the way that, again, the system is designed to really just, there's so much when it comes to systemic racism that, we would need an entirely, like, a 15,000 day year. We'd need a lot more time than we have this afternoon to really dive into that. But as they're about to wrap up, the MC is wrapping everything up, and TD interrupts and says, I don't mean to cut you off, but I can't just sit here and be part of this panel and not share anything. And he goes through, shares a bit of his experience, and then donates $100,000 to get as many fathers as possible bailed out for Father's Day. And you just see Christy on the far side bawling, just absolutely bawling. And I spoke with her after. She's spoken at some of our post-foundation forums before and really shared her experience as not only as an activist, but as someone who was part of a relationship of domestic abuse and turned to drugs and alcohol and ended up spending a lot of time in prison because of it. And just seeing her tears streaming down her face about being able to do for people what she wasn't able to do for herself. I'm like, I'm in a professional capacity, but dear God, my heart is breaking. And just being able to see a little good on right before Father's Day. It's something I said when this all started was find the good. And that's taken a lot of forms since March, but just every single day, especially in light of what we continue to see with not only George Floyd, but Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. Every single life lost and every single day where it's some form of injustice, but to be able to find just a little bit of good it makes my heart sing just a tiny bit.
Yes, and piggybacking off of what you were saying, it kind of goes along with what Misha was saying about being on the front lines. Also about, how marginalized we've been, even during this protest. Journalists have been arrested, journalists have been shot at with rubber bullets. It seems like we have a president who creates scenarios and puts people at danger when they're just trying to fight for freedom. What does the church say about this, John? Like, the church has always, the Black church especially, has always tried to be on the front lines of civil rights. What does the church say about all of the things that are going on?
So I don't get the uplifting question. I get the what does the church say question. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to tell you what was the bright spot, but I'm going to hit that one. That's a quick one. For us, we were able to break ground during the middle of a pandemic on our new publishing house in Nashville, and that was huge. We put together a creative virtual ceremony with our publisher, and people from all over the world, from South Africa to the United States, called in, and it was really well done. And for the church to see, the AME church to see that we were able to begin a building project in the middle of a pandemic was huge, and helping to report that was amazing. Now, about that question, what is the Black church doing? Well, I think, again, I've done my best to try to make sure that people see and hear our voice. Again, so whether this is contributing, whether it's encouraging pastors to share articles, laypersons to write articles, our bishops to speak, because we're out there. It's just people may not know or not hear us. And so I've tried to amplify the voice and try to put us in dialogue. Like, there are people who are members who you would never know are AMEs, but are out leading Black Lives Matter protests, but you wouldn't know that. So I've tried to bring them in to let the church know we're out there, and this person that you didn't know was from you is actually leading this. But I think that we are trying to find our voice, because it's one thing I have to say on the call. We, as has been brought up over and over again, the Black Lives Matter movement, this moment is about all Black lives. And we all know that the Black church has had to come to issue with our issues with, how we deal with LGBTQ issues, how we deal with issues of patriarchy. And so those are internal self-examinations that we're doing right now as we're trying to help give prophetic voice to this movement that is led by largely queer and LGBTQ African Americans and others. So we've had to have our own soul searching, but I am cautiously optimistic and hopeful that the things that we've been dealing with, at least in the AME Church, the inside, are helping us to be better supporters and leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement. Because, you can't talk about Black lives till you talk about all Black lives. So the same voices that I hear for Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, I need to hear for the trans Black women who get killed. So that's been a discussion we've been having within the church to try to liberate our own witness. And I'm hopeful about that, but we definitely are working through that.
So I'm sorry, Deanna, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that is commendable. I know some great pastors and preachers and clergymen in our area that have always been fighting for civil rights, and I know a lot of them who are fighting now, and so that makes me hopeful for what the church is doing during this time. I would also like to say that as a millennial, I said on the last broadcast that I was on that this has been a harrowing but also hopeful 3 months since COVID-19 came, and since we've had social unrest in our country, because I just took over as publisher of our newspaper. That was, my mom was the publisher before, and my dad was the publisher before her. And so, I believe that my legacy is to take us into the digital age, and kind of joining those two, making sure I preserve the history of what they started and take it to the next level. How has it been for you guys with your superiors or your bosses or people who, are of the older generation? How has it been trying to take this platform to the next level? How has it been to be a millennial and try to have your voice heard and take the Black press to the next level?
Well, I'll speak to that. It has been great at the Afro. When I first came on, like I said earlier, they initially hired me because of my background in broadcast journalism, and they knew they wanted to continue to elevate their digital platform. So my existence at the Afro was already because those in longer and wiser years knew that there was a necessity, for digital media. And so it has been great. I think at times it's surprising to me how willing our leaders are to jump in and say, yeah, let's do this, if you just have a plan in order to do so. And so for me, I started 2 shows while there, called The Rundown and Afro Facts, on top of, the interviews and things that we're doing. And we're actually starting one very soon. So I have to tease that for you all to look out for that. But the Afro and The Rundown are weekly shows. And I just kind of put it together one day. They're like, okay, if it works, then sure, we can do it. And so I put together the format, the script, and we had The Rundown, and we were shooting with the team. Then, the same team that was coming in for The Rundown, the same video team for The Rundown, I told them, hey guys, I have the Afro Facts. I think this should only take like 10 minutes to film. Of course I was wrong, but I told them this, and they're like, yeah, put it together. Let's get it done. So the following week we were doing Afro Facts, and the 2 programs have become weekly things that our entire staff looks forward to, as well as our viewership. So I think it's not, I again commend, all those at the Afro who have been there for a while and said, hey, yeah, let's go and jump into this digital world. I've had no resistance from my superiors on it. In fact, sometimes they're like, hey, Nisha, why haven't we done this yet? Or let's see how we can make this happen. But I also think for any of those watching who are millennials in media, and you know that there's something that you can do better, or you know that there's something that you can bring that can elevate the brand, just do it. Have the plan and execute it. And I can almost guarantee you that your publisher will be excited and really embrace it, because everybody knows that we're moving into a primarily digital world. And we don't know when news studios and things like that will be open back up in a big way. So it's our time now as the Black press to find these creative ways, because who knows how long we're going to be reporting virtually anyway.
Right. And what would you say to Lindy? What question would you ask her as it pertains to reporting digitally and what she has learned over this time period? What question would you ask?
So, Lindy's here in DC with me. So I'm curious how she's been able to navigate all that's happening in safety, right? In your safety right now, while also, doing coverage and going out there, and how you've been able to do those two, protecting yourself, but also doing due justice to what's happening.
I appreciate that question. It's definitely been a little trying, just because, as you know, there's been a lot of turmoil in the district right now. And also just due to the shutdowns, we only have access but to so many things. It's definitely harder to pin people down for interviews, but you just have to kind of utilize your network as best as possible. I really do love the fact that, as a contributing writer for the Washington Informer, our publisher, Denise Roloff Barnes, and our editor, Kevin McNair, they've been so encouraging in, making sure that we do remain safe, but also pushing us to kind of, as far as the younger staff, to really spearhead our creative direction. And narrative. We're working on a podcast studio and other things that can kind of keep us a little more out of the street, but also still engaged in pushing our messaging far and wide. So that's been to the best of my ability. I'm trying to stay safe, but still get a hold of a lot of people. And just through the work that I've been able to do prior to the shutdown, I still have so many connections and people to reach out to, that if I don't have a connection to someone for a specific piece or interview, someone else that I may be affiliated with can help put me in the right place. So it's been a team effort, but it's been a good one.
Awesome. And Lindy, what would you ask Ashley about how she has been able to make connections and kind of push the digital envelope during this time?
That's a good one. My question would be, well, everyone is online, obviously, a lot more now. So have there been any unique, strategies that you have put in place to kind of broadcast your writings as well, or get your work out and disseminate it in different ways than you would generally prior to the shutdown?
Well, one, thank you for the question. Two, we use social media quite a bit in addition to our website presence and our Apple News presence as well. But we've started experimenting a little bit more on the social side, particularly Instagram. And we went down the path and added TikTok to everything. So the Sharp post on TikTok, the Sharp post on Twitter, the Sharp post on Snapchat. And if it's out there, then we're on it. And that's something I have to credit our editor-in-chief, Herb White, with, where he has been very, very supportive of anything in terms of, if you think it's going to reach a broader audience, do it. Oh, yes, boss. Absolutely. We have a Star Wars joke going back and forth. Since my days as an intern, he is Yoda, except much smaller and not green. I am the young Padawan causing all the trouble. But to that end, it's offered a lot of, how do you meet people where they are in terms of which platform serves them best? And this is actually something I have to ask everyone. Which social media platform do you find the best for your respective publications?
Nice.
I'd say for the Afro, definitely Facebook. We have our largest following, and it has been definitely best for us to sort of test out our new content on Facebook, even if it's still being, if it's still featured on our website and we're getting a lot of hits there. And it is also on YouTube, and we get a fewer viewers there, but really testing our insights. I mean, we had most success on Facebook. However, we are climbing those follower counts and people looking to us on Instagram and Twitter. And we just got a TikTok last week as well. So we're definitely on every social media platform. You can keep it up to date on all that the Afro is doing in that sense. However, Facebook has been our bread and butter and our home base for our social media followers.
Yeah, same for us here. Same for us here at Facebook. We are doing some more stuff on YouTube, but Facebook seems to be where our people live and enjoy. We have a bit of a Twitter following that, but Facebook seems to be what works for us the best right now.
And Lindy?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question for me?
What's the best social media platform for your publication?
The best, Facebook is definitely a great platform, but Twitter as well, because outside of just posting or, maybe having video footage of certain stories, people want to hear what we think personally as well, and hear things in live time. So Twitter and Facebook, I would say, would probably been the most useful vehicles for our publication.
Awesome. Yeah, I would say the same even for The Advocate. I started a webcast about a month and a half ago. We've had 5 episodes, so maybe a month and a week. And so we've been tackling the issues of our community, especially as it pertains to COVID-19, as it pertains to the social unrest that we've had, and also to mental health. What would you guys say about mental health? And I'll go back to you, John, because
y'all just love picking on me. All right. What we talking about?
A lot we did when I did that webcast, I made sure that I included one of our local pastors from a historic church in our Jackson community. And because I think that the church is very important as it pertains to where people go to seek spiritual guidance and to, kind of take a load off. And we haven't really had that to be able to go into a physical building, most of us, since all of this hit. So how has your organization been tackling mental health in our community?
That's an interesting question. That's a good question, actually. So back to your point about not being in church. If there's one thing we've learned, and I put the disclaimer by saying I am not an ordained clergy person, nor do I aspire to be. I just run the church's newspaper. It's been that we've learned that the church can't just be the building. And so what we found is that congregations that had pastors who checked up on their members or who did things throughout the week are faring better than those that only went in Sunday and left. That we had, so what we're learning and what all of, what a lot of our pastors have learned is that, you have to build in opportunities to help reach to your members, also help your members help find their own prayer lives, their own well-being. So for us, our health commission has done several webinars on how to be mindful, how to take care of your own mental health. I was actually on a conference last night for one of our regions, and the first thing they did, they had a licensed therapist who was also a member of the church start with a mindfulness break. She actually did a mindfulness training about breathing and using faith. So I've seen these things in pockets, and also I'll highlight Tama Bryant Davis, who She's a psychologist and also is an AME elder. She from time to time has said certain things. So we know that mental health is concerned during the pandemic, especially because can't get to your building. We're hit by this, and to top it all off, George Floyd. So I've seen intentionality from our institutions that we have, but it comes down to, you know, your own personal relationship with your creator, whether that's Christian, whether that's Buddhist, whether that's whatever, what your faith walk is. You have to nurture that yourself. You can't rely on a building. You have to look into that yourself. Now, we can help you. A pastor can help or guide you, but you have to find that for yourself. And I think what we've been trying to do is to give our members the tools to study at home, the tools to do their personal devotions, but also letting them know it's okay to say, it's okay to put a special emphasis on looking at your mental health. So those are some of the things the AME Church has done institutionally.
And Ashley, how have you guys been addressing mental health in your area? And even how has the publication itself been addressing the mental health of the people who work there?
Exactly. And I'm sure that, you know, readers, people within our respective organizations, the works, we've all felt a little like this pandemic, because no one was going into 2020 saying, hey, we're getting ready for this pandemic. No one was going and saying that. If you were, then where's your crystal ball and may I borrow it? But to that end, our advertising team has engaged digitally with a bunch of Zoom pop-ups about being prepared. They've had on everything, you know, from real estate planning to something as simple as, is your pantry ready? Like, if you can't go to the store because you are concerned about health risks and you're not comfortable ordering these things online, are you ready on that aspect? Are you ready financially? Are you ready in terms of what it would look like for your family if something happened to you? And just that general sense of, can you hit on every single element of feeling completely prepared, saying, goodness knows how long this will last, but here are some tools to help you get through it. And maybe this is, God forbid, we hit another one of these and it's the next generation. Do you have the tools to pass down to them to say that they're prepared for it? So in addition to what our marketing team has done in terms of the physical publication itself, we've been running numerous stories in terms of coping, dealing with mental health, in terms of, it can be as simple as going for a walk and just clearing your head and having 5 seconds. It can be meditating, it can be yoga. Goodness knows I've done a lot of yoga since all of this started, but things of that nature have been how we've definitely tapped into really helping our readers navigate the mental health side.
Yeah, what about you, Misha? Like, being on the front lines and seeing people, I'm sure, who are upset about all that's going on. How have you been addressing mental illness or mental health in your community, or what have you seen out on the front lines as far as mental health is concerned?
Thank you for that question. So I'll start with the Afro in general. From my time there, has placed a major emphasis on covering mental health in the Black community. And because of that, we've been able to do a lot of great stories on it during COVID-19. We had a lot of connections. We were already with the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation, because last year I interviewed Taraji when she came to DC, launching her initiative with Congress and Black mental health. We've had a lot of fitness experts on. We've had a series called Meet the Blank, and a couple have been Meet the Counselor and the health professional. And so we've done a lot on mental health coverage prior, and of course during COVID-19, and then and of course during the protests. That said, I had to kind of have a quick moment of addressing my own mental health before going out onto the front lines, and even once I did so. Last year, headed to cover an event at the Kennedy Center, I had a very negative experience with the Metropolitan Police Department, and I was thrown to the ground, bruised up. Of course, eventually, you know, I said I'm a journalist and showed them I was going to cover an event. And these were two Black officers, might add, two young Black officers who tackled me and arrested me and pushed me to the ground. But their white sergeant let me go, and I just in time to make my curtain for the Kennedy Center. Imagine something like that. Anyway, but you know, I went to go do work right after, and so I don't know if I've cried a lot, and of course, the Afro initially wanted me to try to do some columns on it, and I just was not ready. And so seeing the George Floyd video, not that I needed to even see it because I knew what was going down, seeing Ahmaud Arbery, seeing these videos really messed me up before going to the front lines, because I'm very aware that they are the extremes of a problem that happens to hundreds, if not thousands, of Black and brown people daily. So I had to address my own mental health in that regard. I'm a runner, and I also teach Zumba, and so working out has always been my thing, but it was really about meditating and talking to people and getting it out there for myself so that I could be okay and not be triggered every time I saw someone angry or passionate, or a police officer doing something that I didn't agree with, but I had to have a certain level of professionalism because I was covering. So, I had to do that, and I'm continuing to do that. And I think the Afro is doing a great job of healing, ensuring that we're all well. We check in with one another daily, like I said, in our end of the day meetings. And because the Afro is not at all afraid of their Christian foundation, we pray at the beginning and end of every meeting, and we pray for one another and take petitions and things like that. So in that sense, I'm so lucky to be a journalist working for a Black paper such as the Afro during this time, because it is really trying on my emotional, mental, physical health. But I think seeing those people out there and understanding their passion, we got to be out there and covering it.
Yeah, we are live. This is the Black Press of America. We do this every Monday and Wednesday at 1:00 with our publishers. Today, though, we have a very special panel. It's the younger generation of the Black Press of America. So be sure to keep tuning in, because we continue to hear the important voices, the vital voices of our younger generation. And on Wednesday evening at 7:00, we continue our special conversation series with some of the those who have achieved outstanding things in music and in entertainment. We'll have DMC from Run DMC at 7:00 on Wednesday. Deanna, I know you were asking about the mental health issue. I'm not sure that Lindy has weighed in yet on that.
Yes, go ahead. I
Sorry.
wanted to ask specifically, I saw a video of a little boy. He was playing outside, and he's just playing basketball. He happened to see a cop car go by, and he hid behind his parents' car. Images like that, and what you see and report on every day. How are those conversations with your family members? How are those conversations with your close friends as it pertains to the images that we see every day in our mental health?
I would say with my personal circle, I think, and I just, with people generally, you see these stories and you're enraged. Sometimes you just have to know to pull yourself back and think of, okay, how can I move forward from here? How can I move forward from here and really tell this story in a way that's going to be helpful, as it needs to be heard. But even earlier today, just watching the situation of Elijah McClain, for example, it literally just puts you in tears. It changes your mood. You know what I mean? And there's times that, I can imagine experiencing what Misha experienced, for example, when you're going through something that tragic, or you have something that tragic happen to you, and you have to get right back to it and perform in front of other people and still do your job, and I think that sometimes you don't necessarily assess your mental health. you're just so focused on trying to tackle your work, you know, and you're unfortunately, I think we're also in a time where we're negative messaging in our news. So we become so used to it, almost so you become numb to it. And I think once that begins to happen, you do need to pull away, unplug, you know, and just kind of take control of your own space, you know, as much as we can control what happens in our own bubble, if you will. So I try my best to unplug by also exercising, you know, speaking with people that I know understand my sentiments, you know, and that can be helpful in just helping us balance those emotions and making productive just resolutions and solutions to what's happening around us and what's happening in our community. I know that with the Washington Informer as well, we're just very supportive to each other like a family. So when we have our weekly check-ins and we do discuss these stories, you know, we make sure to remind each other to stay safe as we do it, you know, and just support each other through, you know, we've had staff members that have fallen ill themselves and, you know, had issues due to COVID as well. So making sure that we know that we're here for each other in support, you know, and also pushing each other to do the best work that we can, you know, while we're going through this time.
Well, and what would you say, John? Who is your village? You know, we always say, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, and I still feel like it takes a whole city to raise an adult. So, who is in your village where you can unload all of this stuff and talk with them about the things that you work on, the things that you're seeing and covering in today's society?
Well, it's interesting. Two things on that. One, about a couple of weeks ago, my best friend from college, I went to Morehouse when an undergrad. My best friend from college and we put together a small WhatsApp group. WhatsApp is this virtual messaging platform. I know we all know on this thing, but for those who may not be familiar with it, and it's also largely used outside the United States because a lot of our friends are outside the U.S. We just put together this group to start talking and sharing back and forth, and we brought in some of our friends who had been in our department and our major, and you know the group's grown to about 15 brothers, and it's just been really refreshing to hear, you know, college professors, diplomats, community activists, teachers, all of us just chopping it up and talking about, as Black men especially, just, you know, what's going on and what we're seeing. So that's been very, very helpful. And I'm glad that my best friend decided to bring back the group. And just me personally, I never will forget this. George Floyd had the video just come out, and a friend of mine who lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, called me and she asked me, "How are you feeling?" And this was the first time, you know, I've everything from Ferguson up till now. I mean, all my life, you know, I see these things, you hear these things, and this is like the first time I can remember that someone actually asked me, "Well, how are you feeling?" And she said, "Well, you know, I talked to my dad, I talked to my brothers, I talked to my friends. I just wanted to call you because we're close. How are you feeling?" And I had no words. I said, I don't really know. But I was actually kind of embarrassed. I said, I really don't have any words for you. And I didn't have my words for her until I had gone out to the protest up here in Chicago. And I actually walked the 2 miles up to the gentrified neighborhood that the protesters were in. And when I walked back home, I finally, you know, and I sat down on the top, I wrote a brief post that we put on our Facebook page that led to an editorial that I wrote called "We Will Breathe" for our June edition. And I found my words. I didn't have words. I guess I was rendered so numb, traumatized, like, well, this is what happens to people. I had no words. I had no words. And I had to go find my words because they were so backed up, I didn't have them. So I'm glad she asked me. And I told her, I called her back and I said, you know, I'm glad you asked because I didn't have any words. And you actually prompted me to go say, well, where are my words? And I had to walk to go find them. But definitely reconnecting with my college classmates and being more intentional with my thoughts. And her, and then, you know, talking to some other friends have been helpful. But that's been how I've been able to process this because it's not been easy. Because, you know, we live in a daily traumatized state in this country, people of African descent, especially, you know, I mean, Black women get shot as much as Black men, but we've been seeing Well, the media will tell you who is getting shot and can't even run, breathe, or bring a toy gun, et cetera, et cetera. So let's leave it at that.
Definitely. Um, I have two best friends. They both are not Black, and they have never really said anything or acted in any way that was discriminatory or racist towards me, but I don't think they really understood the extent of what we go through in this country until the George Floyd video came out. Misha, what would you say, or have you had any in-depth conversations with friends or family members who are of another race during
And
this time?
Misha, before you answer that question, just want you the panel to know we have about a little less than 10 minutes remaining, so we want to go around the panel on this one before we wrap up. So go ahead, Misha.
Yeah, so I've had dialogue with friends and colleagues who work at other publications, like I mentioned earlier, directly just checking on how am I as a Black person existing in society doing. And so that has been comforting, because I think then anything else I need to say can come out naturally once I know that I'm talking to a person who has an understanding that times is hard, as they say, right? And so having that first moment of check-in, I think, has been integral to having longer conversations across races and ethnicities. And I've had quite a lot. And they've all been, for the most part, from a place of people saying, wow, I thank you for covering this stuff. Thank you for calling my attention to these problems. And there have been a few people where I'm shocked it's taken them so long to have such a wake-up call. But hey, I'm happy that the wake-up call is here. So that's my abbreviated answer, if you will.
Great. Lindy?
I have not really been contacted so much by colleagues, to be honest with you, but definitely by family. And of course, within our own publication, we speak a lot and support each other a lot, but definitely by family. I have family that's overseas in South Africa, and just from what they're seeing, knowing that, COVID numbers are high and kind of out of control here in this area. And then also just because of what we've been seeing from so many police killings of Black people from police, just concerned about, how I'm doing, making sure that I'm keeping safe, and that always feels good, just to know that you have people that are concerned about your well-being, and that, you're not weathering this alone, because we're also separated. Even though we're all going through it together, we're still kind of separated due to the health pandemic. And that can be difficult. Sometimes you just want that physical support of people. And, with us being separated, it can make it harder. But when people are able to reach out, through these platforms, I speak to my family a lot over WhatsApp, and, still being able to see the faces of my colleagues from the publication, it leaves a good feeling knowing that everyone is still alive and well, and trucking through things.
Mm-hmm. And Ashley?
It's interesting. I mean, the best example is probably whenever one of our photographers and I are out on assignment, they'll say, well, where's your reporter? I'm like, she's right there. I'll say, where? Because the little white girl right there. They're like, what? Her? Really? Like, I know. It's strange. A lot of people are like, okay. And it was like that for probably about the first year. And then people are like, it's Ashley. She works for the Post. She can do this job well. And to know that 2016 here in Charlotte, when Keith Lamont Scott was shot and killed by Charlotte Mecklenburg police, that moment, there have been two stories that have made me cry. One was the column I wrote when my mom died, and the second was this one. And I remember just sitting there in our newsroom looking across at our editor-in-chief and thinking, for the first time, this light bulb went off in my head. And I'm a kid from rural upstate New York, where the concept that racism still existed was completely foreign. But to see everything now, to realize this is here, this is going, and again, this is 4 years ago now, but this is life for so many people. And just constantly asking our publisher, what do you need me to do? How can I help? What do you need me to do? And he said, just keep doing what you're doing. Just keep making sure that voices that are often unheard are out there, and they're out there as loud as possible.
Wow. John?
Do I talk to other? Well, that's an easy answer. My friends know me. My ally white friends, I remember one of them, she's a pastor out in Arizona. She messaged me. But I will say this. Facebook timelines have been very revealing on whom you can chat with and whom you can't. And I haven't unfriended anyone as of yet, but I think I may have been unfriended by some things I've said online. But I think I've got a good village of people across, racial ethnicity that get it and understand it. And basically, if you're my friend, then you understand this and you understand me. If I can call you friend and you're white, black, Indian, whatever, you understand me. And so I think that hasn't been an issue for me, though I do think I may have lost one or two friends because of a post, but they'll be okay.
Yes, last question is, what is the legacy and importance of the Black press, and how can the Black press not just be nationally recognized and respected, but internationally recognized and respected? And we'll go to Misha.
So I love that question. I first have to say that in having worked for the Black press since 2015, which I know is not long in comparison to probably many of you watching, but I and internationally already. I think that obviously I'd love to see us be looked to immediately as a source of information in our respective cities, as well as for somebody who just is tuning in from Uganda, but interested in the work that we're doing. I'd love to see it on a larger scale, but I was so encouraged to see how many people are continuing to embrace the Black press nationally and internationally. That said, I think that right now we're at a great opportunity to take advantage of the fact that people want to buy Black, read Black, do Black in all senses of the supporting Black businesses. And so, in the same vein, they want to get their news from Black sources. And so I know that we have to be really intentional about what we're putting out there, making sure that our copy is tight and has, very few or no errors. We have to make sure that our websites look good, that our Facebook, Instagram, and all of our Twitter and all of that is constantly being updated, because it devalues us as soon as somebody, looks at all these amazing people are going to be on Black Press USA today, and then they go to our site and they're like, but what are they doing? And so we have to continue to elevate the brand and ensure that it's happening, but believe in it so much, and know that what we have is beautiful and rare and unique and necessary in the times that we are. And I think hundreds and millions of people will be looking to the Black press in a very, very quick amount of time, because like I said, this is the time where they're looking to us for the answers anyway.
Well, and Misha, we also want them to, and you guys too, to register for our first ever virtual convention, which is coming up on July 8th and July 9th, virtualnnpa.com, virtualnnpa2020.com. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Deanna, who did you want to go to next there?
Lindy, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, I think that it's important for us. It is a great time, honestly, to be a part of Black Press because so many of the things that are happening are attacking us the most, and people do want to know and they need to know our stories, as I always say, for us, by us, from us. I think that we need to just continue to empower our voices, empower our communities. And I think that there's also a responsibility of some of these social media platforms to push our publications and our narratives further than they are, making our publications officially marked on Facebook, on Twitter, so that just as a branding method, people know that they can come to our sources for credible, real news. And us not be looked over, I think, the way that we generally are, because even some of these mainstream media outlets, they may be mainstream, but they're not always really accurate in speaking for us. So I think that's an important piece as well.
Yes, and to advertise with us, like Jay-Z gave thousands of dollars to other publications. Where is our money? We're here. We've been telling our stories, and we need the money to keep surviving and to keep telling our stories, because though people may profit, though mainstream publications may profit off of us, we're the only ones who really can get out the word and have be a trustworthy source to our community. John, what would you say is our importance, and how can we be respected nationally and internationally?
Well, first, it's so the Christian Recorder has been around since 1852. Scholars look at us as the oldest extant Black publication that's been around. We're the only one around that's been around since the Civil War. And so when they put the youngest editor of the oldest paper in the church, people actually did that because they wanted to see us grow and thrive. And what I've learned in my 4 years in this desk has been that we have to tell our story the same way that we tell other people's stories. We have to value ourselves if we want to be valued. So and to Misha's point, that means taking pride in our websites and pride in our presentation. That means demanding our space if there's not a space. I mean, I went to the Associated Church Press meeting and I said, you don't have a Black publication on your board. It's a problem. And they said, well, we could put one on now. I said, well, hey, yeah, if you want, fine. But we have to demand our space, demand the attention, because we've been out telling these stories for centuries. And yet the first people that get overlooked are the Black papers because we don't have the sheen as a mainstream publication. That's a problem. So we really, as a community, have to be introspective on what we value. But again, we have to show that we are as capable and as competent and have the same reach and can do the same work. You just have to trust the story. So I think if we were to show and walk in that pride, I think we'd see a different response. But definitely the Black press is to be valued. There are people saying, oh, newspapers are going away and yada, yada, yada. But who will tell our stories if we go? No one. And so we need to be around. And if you show people why you're supposed to be around, you'll still be there. And as I joke with people, I say, we survived segregation, we survived Civil War, we'll probably survive Trump. So, we need to still be here. So I think we have to walk in our boldness and authority, but we also have to respect ourselves enough to do the due diligence to make sure our copy is straight, our branding is tight, and our window to the world is fine. That's what I would say.
Ashley?
I mean, John, you said it. You said it all. I mean, all of you have said exactly. And all I can do is reiterate everything that you said. And if you value Black press, then why are you taking out a full page ad in the Daily or running an ad on the radio or in TV? Like your budget doesn't extend to your local Black newspaper. Somehow that just doesn't quite add up. But maybe that's just me. It's not. So to that end, put your money where your mouth is. If you value everything that you say and all of the cushy statements that all these companies put out in June after George Floyd's death, if they meant it, show it. Put your manure in your mouth. That to the extent, and especially when people say, "Oh, the media is not going to show you this. We're showing it to you. You just shared our link saying that the media is not going to show you this." Just, I think people need to have a really long, hard conversation in the mirror about where are you getting your news and how are you. If people talk about supporting local all the time, Black press needs to be included in that.
Yep.
That's just me.
Well, again, it's important to Ashley, John, Misha, Lindy, Deanna. Our convention is coming up. It's a virtual convention. It's free. So we invite everyone to register for virtual NMPA2020.com. Lindy Villakazi of the Washington Informer, Ashley Mahoney of the Charlotte Post, John Thomas III of the Christian Recorder, and of course, Misha Green of the Afro. We really appreciate you all, and Deanna Tisdale Johnson jumping in to moderate this great conversation among our great young, the future of the Black press. You've seen it here. Come back again on Wednesday when we will have 4 more publishers at 1 o'clock. So thank you for joining us. Stay safe and stay well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank
having me.
you.
So much for having us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.